So we're talking today about the redesign of the Caltrain corridor, and we're welcoming David Shen, a Palo Alto resident who's recently gotten involved in the whole process. You live on Churchill, near the Churchill intersection, and are part of this new group, North Old Palo Alto. So welcome welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
So the phrase eminent domain is not a phrase that any homeowner really wants to hear, but it's been bandied about a bit because of Caltrain's electrification process that's coming in the more frequent trains and the need to redesign how the roads intersect with the rail. David, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this issue and kind of what the thrust of North Old Palo Alto is?
Sure. It's probably around late November, like the week right before Thanksgiving of last year, when I got a little piece of paper that said, oh, you should go to this community meeting about this rail thing. I'm like, I don't know what this is. So I went and then met some of my neighbors who were involved in stuff, kind of got more knowledgeable and realized, oh, my house might be seized through eminent domain, as you just mentioned. I might lose my house. And it's, I'm doing a remodel right now.
Wow.
And that just took my stress like tenfold from there. Going to remodel, putting that money into it, that effort into it, and all of a sudden, boom, within a few months, I might get notification that my house might be gone. So that's a pretty heavy motivator. And so then I and a bunch of folks, it's probably about, 4 or 5, 6 of us or something that are really active on this. We started going up and down the street and notifying people, which also was shocking that nobody knew about this.
So you were bringing this to them essentially for the first time.
Yeah, for the first time. Yeah. And in fact, even today, we constantly meet people who have no idea what is going on. And I think that's a serious problem.
Yeah.
So we formed this group. We had to call ourselves something, the North Old Palo Alto group. I think Old Palo Alto, the URL was taken, so we had to put a North on the N in front of it. And then we started thinking about, well, how can we move this forward and how can we work on this? So had a huge, fast crash course in city advocacy and community outreach and how to write petitions, although this one may not be the best petition written. We had to learn about that.
How to put up a website.
How to put up a website, all that kind of stuff within weeks. And started banging on doors, learning about how to get signatures, all that kind of stuff. And we've been to every single related meeting at the city that's been out there. At least one of us has gone. Usually it's multiple people have gone. The rail committee meetings, the city councils we've spoken at. We've also met with nearly all the city council members as well, just to kind of give them our take on things and to get feedback from them on how we're thinking and how we're going about this.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is interesting is that you're not just on the east side of the tracks, but some of your members are on the west side, which is the Southgate neighborhood. So you actually have brought together 2 different neighborhoods to address this issue.
Yeah, because they're as affected as we are. Because the eminent domain issue extends about a block to all 4 directions of the intersection. So, of course, we went down there and started telling them about it, and they knew nothing about it either. And the weirdness about Churchill on that side is there's actually a street called Mariposa that is also within that. So not only is the block of Churchill affected, that whole block of Mariposa is affected too, because that intersects into what would be a lower street.
Yeah.
So there's a whole slew of people that we told there who are also shocked to know that, oh, by the way, a whole bunch of remodels and rebuilds are happening up there.
Wow.
And the eminent domain is a very good motivator to get people into action on a particular issue.
Yeah.
How many hours would you say that you're spending a week just working on this issue alone?
Oh my God, it's got to be 8 to 10 at least, maybe more actually. If you count walking the streets and answering emails, soliciting signatures, all that kind of stuff. And there's so much that you just got to keep pushing on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. So Gennady, there's a rail committee meeting this week. I wonder if you could just help us by kind of bringing us up to speed, as it were, on this whole redesign process and where we're at, where we're about to go.
Yeah, well, Jocelyn, as you know, the council has a goal this year of by the end of the year deciding exactly what it wants to do with its rail corridor. By December, it wants to know whether to build trenches, tunnels, viaducts. I guess it's a new option, hybrids. There were like dozens of ideas. In fact, they had 34 ideas just like a month ago. Then they narrowed down to 16. Now they're narrowed down to 10. And I think the huge milestone is going to be like in a couple of weeks when the full council gets to talk about this. It's only been at the committee level, and the full council will have a chance to narrow down options to somewhere around 10, and with the idea that they're going to pick something in the next few months. I just want to touch on David's point. I can see why mentioning eminent domain would get people excited, because obviously you don't want your property seized, but my reading of where the city is right now is that they're pretty far from making those kinds of decisions or even deciding that they're going to have any kind of underground options or hybrid options that would get there. So it does seem like Dave and his neighbors are getting ahead of the game, which is probably a good thing. But I would hate to kind of alarm people to the extent of thinking this is coming, just in a few months, because if it does happen, it's going to be a while. Or that it's an absolute. Yeah. I think they're pretty far from that decision yet. But we do have a list of 10 ideas that we can go over all of them. We probably don't want to go through all of them right now, but pertaining to, David's neighborhood, what they have right now is closing Churchill, having this hybrid option, which is where you lower like the road a little bit and raise the train a little bit, the each dip a little bit, and the no-build alternative, which basically leaves configuration as is, but adds a few kind of like turn signals, traffic safety, maybe gates, things like that. And I did wanted to ask David actually, because you were at the meeting as well and you've seen these options. Aside from your opposition to anything that requires eminent domain, do you have any preference, and do you and your neighbors have preferences among the menu of options currently on the table for Churchill?
Well, if you go to our website, we detail out what we support and don't support. So the first thing we like to say is, we support the trench or tunnel, because either one of those, a lowered rail option solves our issues, right? It does satisfy them. So that's we always like to say that, and we're fine with either of those two. We don't support a raised rail. We have a number of our group whose backyards back up onto the tracks, and nobody wants to have a train being able to look farther down into their backyards or in their houses or windows. We are opposed to the lowering the road in any way. So anything that causes eminent domain, of course. We've talked about that already.
That'd be sort of like an Oregon Expressway type of thing, or? Yeah,
so imagine a concrete-like structure, underpass like Embarcadero or Oregon Expressway, but at Churchill and Alma. And it is still a serene neighborhood. It looks like that, but if we were to build that there, it would change the character of the neighborhood. It would attract more traffic there. It would decrease the safety of the residents. It's like all that stuff would just be negatives, and it'd just be this ugly concrete structure sitting in the middle of our neighborhood. Right?
What about this new concept they just unveiled this week, the reverse hybrid, where you lower the train so you wouldn't have those visual people from the train looking into yards, but raise the roads. You might have more drivers looking at the yards.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any opinions about that? I know it's kind of a new thing that just came out, so I don't know if you had a chance to talk
I guess
to
I was kind of surprised that somebody brought it up, because I think Caltrain must have just dropped the suggestion. I'm not even sure it was in context. I don't even know what context it was, right, that it came about.
They have their technical group meetings. I think it came out of that.
Yeah. And but the eminent domain would still happen in that case, because the road would still be rising in all four directions, likely. We'd still have that issue.
So if the road were lowered at all, even if it's a hybrid, which sounds less low than an underpass, eminent domain would still be required to take some homes. Is that correct? And then if it was raised even slightly, then eminent domain would also apply. Okay.
Likely happen. Yep.
Okay. And the trench option, the road would stay exactly flat, but the tunnels, the trains would be in the tunnel, so that would not require.
That's right. And so we kind of look at it as almost like a waterfall for the city to follow, right? It's like, let's look at some of these options, and if you can't do certain things that we all like or don't like, right, or like, then the fallback is, well, let's just close Churchill, right? But let's also look at it, the traffic as a system. because this isn't just about Churchill, is, well, where does that traffic go to if we close Churchill? So our proposal is to look at Embarcadero 2, which is what I've heard is a 1930s built structure, is overdue for upgrading anyway. It is a little strange that it necks down from 4 lanes on the top and on the bottom, from 4 lanes to 3 there, which causes severe traffic congestion problems, both on top and in the bottom. And somebody should do something about that pretty soon anyway. So, and there's a circulation study that was done, I think, late last year that basically stated that if Churchill was closed, they believe that the traffic would naturally divert over to Embarcadero anyway, and there wouldn't be much affected traffic over there regardless, which is good. It's good that, you know, somebody at least take an initial look at that. But, you know, and then on top of that, we propose a bunch of bike and pedestrian access options, like some kind of underpass for the cyclists and pedestrians over at Churchill, because all the Palo Alto High students are using that as a main thoroughfare to get there. Well, let's also retain that ability for them to cross there, even if cars cannot.
It's like a Homer Tunnel kind of thing on Churchill.
Yeah, it could be something like Homer. I've heard Homer is more of a hybrid kind of option. It may just be simply going down without the raising of the tracks. Who knows? That's a detail that, as an armchair engineer since November that I'm educated, I probably shouldn't comment on or can't comment on, but you know, those are details the city's going to have to get into.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like stopping the traffic for bikes and pedestrians already is kind of a time lag. It's affecting traffic right now, just getting people across the street. So it would be very interesting to see if tunnels or underpasses just for them that actually start on the east side of Alma, instead of having them to cross Alma and then going down, you know, would actually speed up traffic on Alma if the Churchill was closed. The Churchill was closed, yeah.
It does strike me that, you know, since David and his group formed, we have seen council members talk a lot more about eminent domain and how big of a worrisome issue it is. So it does seem like you guys have had some early success. I mean, going back to the council retreat, Greg Tanaka tried to kind of make it a whole policy. We're not going to do eminent domain. And they weren't ready to go that far because it wasn't agendized or anything. But even this past week, they tried to move eminent domain in their criteria to like the very top, to the tier 1, like as things they consider before making these options. And I think they didn't approve that change because, again, it wasn't on the agenda, but they did talk about the fact that they should just eliminate tiers altogether and just kind of have eminent domain as one of the things the council really considers when it finalizes options. So given those discussions, I wanted to kind of hear your assessment, David, about whether you think your group's been heard, whether you're heartened by these comments, whether you want to see the council take any kind of more formal commitments. What is your assessment of your success so far?
Well, we think we've got a lot of support, actually, from the city on our proposals, or at least on our waterfall, or on our methodology, right? And city staff is very supportive of what we've done. Even in our community efforts, we've really helped them get the word out, right? And get people involved, and to just know that this is happening. And also to help build support in our petition that's now, you know, over 300 signatures and growing, you know, every day, that they see this, they understand it. Yeah, they may have some burps about it, and then they read it some more, and they go, oh, okay, now I get why, you know, these guys are saying this and proposing this, and I'm on board, right? I sign it. So so they really appreciate that, and we're doing, I think, a lot of the work that you know, they're so busy, right? They're trying to do these community meetings, but I think our efforts are really, you know, bolstering those. We've met with every city council member except for one, and they've all given us great feedback on and support for what we've been doing. It remains to be seen, you know, where they will end up, you know, given all the back and forth that's going to happen. But so far, we've had positive reception from all the city council members as well.
And I'm also curious, this is, of course, a city-wide, if not a region-wide project. And so I think at the end of the day, I'm sure the city council will have to consider points of view from all sorts of neighborhoods, Palo Alto Avenue up north, Charleston down south. And I'm curious whether your group has made any efforts or plans to make any efforts to kind of reach out to other neighborhoods and conduct the kind of outreach you did in your own backyard. And I know you're still kind of have immediate concerns, but is there any kind of idea about broadening the effort in getting people from neighborhoods out there involved?
Actually, we've been doing that. Specifically, we've been looking down Charleston Meadow mostly, because we've had some people in our group who know people down there, so it's easier for us to go down that way. So those meetings I think should happen potentially this weekend. But it's really getting late, and as maybe viewers of this video should know that if you live down there, you got to get involved now, because if you don't, some option might be enacted or worked on that may not have the result that you wanted. Because to me, as I'm getting up on the engineering details slowly but surely, I look at some of the options that seem like the magic bullet to solve all the issues, and down that way, I'm not sure actually some of those will do that. Like for instance, I'm not convinced that a trench, as nice as it is from a conceptual standpoint, won't take property. Okay. So that's these are things that someone from that area needs to go and talk about with them, because if they don't get into those details, they may have half their backyard cut off at some point.
Yikes.
Do you see some sort of any kind of conflicts, like you're trying to make sure that those conflicts don't happen from neighborhood to neighborhood, essentially? Do you see that maybe would it have to be kind of a one-size-fits-all, or is it possible to have like a trench down there or not down there, trench where you are, and then another crossing, some other option?
Oh yeah, in fact, that's what's sort of happening now. The challenge is that if you think about it, we already have underpasses at University and Barcadero, Oregon in the north side, so that makes it challenging to put a trench over there. Because what would you do with the underpasses? They're already down there.
Right.
Will we have to rip them up and make them at grade again?
I feel like a citywide trench has already been kind of tossed out as an option.
Yeah. But the citywide tunnel, I think, may come back, at least as something to study. At the meeting that Gennady and I were at, that Lydia Crew had proposed it, and I think it will. My personal opinion is that it will continue into the study phase. So we'll see what happens come June.
It's hanging by a tiny thread.
Yeah, it's hanging by a tiny thread.
This is a tunnel in South Palo Alto that would rise?
No, citywide.
Like a bored tunnel.
Board tunnel, yeah.
Yeah, it's...
But what happens at Oregon Expressway then?
It goes under Oregon Expressway.
It would be under everything.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's pretty deep.
It would be a deep bore. But I think from that discussion, as you know, David, council members pretty much agreed this is almost impossible, but they need to do the studying to kind of reassure people and possibly to get Lydia's vote. I don't know what the other thinking was, but right now, like a full citywide tunnel is kind of, I think it's a long shot, to say the least. That was my reading of the discussion. I don't know. You may disagree, David, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious what's on the table still in the 10 options for Charleston and Meadow. Do they have an underpass situation that's proposed?
There's still a trench on the table for just the southern half of Palo Alto, including Meadow and Charleston. There's the no-build alternative, which is like minor safety things.
Road is still open.
Road is still open. They have to study it for EAR purposes, so they're going to include it on the list. There's the hybrid that we talked about, and then there's the reverse hybrid, which sounds like a wrestling move, but it's a term we learned last week. So raising one, lowering the other. In one case, the rail, in the other case, the road. And doing it both ways.
Okay.
So those are the options for South Palo Alto right now.
Okay.
Still moving forward. From the committee's recommendation, and again, the council will still have the option of reviving other options or adding or subtracting, but that's kind of where we stand right now.
It's still kind of fluid. Yeah. I think one thing that strikes me is that the eminent domain is so radical that to not be looking at that as a criteria, whether the city wants to go for it or not. I mean, you can't just sneak up on the eminent domain. You got to be in with in talking about it for months.
Yeah, and that's why they're elevating it now. Probably thanks to David's efforts and his neighbors, they're elevating it to a higher tier of.
Yeah.
And David, you're right as well, because doesn't the city want to basically come up with a decision on what kind of alternative they want by December, I think? I think that's what they've talked about.
Yeah,
so it's not much time, really.
The decision, is what are we going to do at each intersection? So there's kind of 4 parts to that. That's right.
What's a partial taking? I understand if your house is completely gone, but what are the parcels that are sort of partially affected? Does that mean their backyard gets taken away? Or?
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of variance to that. So some of the more obvious ones is, oh, I sliced part of your front yard or your backyard, right? And that's one part. There was another one that was very interesting that I didn't know about, which is in order to build the trench in Southern California, whose name I'm blanking on right now, there actually still had to be eminent domain discussions because they drove these support stakes underneath people's property.
Tiebacks. I think is it the Alameda corridor? Whatever.
Yeah, sorry, I was blanking on the name. But even though nothing happened on top, someone still had to go through the process because they were putting something way down deep to hold the wall up. Yeah, so somebody. So I think that's also why that people didn't want to say completely no eminent domain. They say minimize eminent domain because they weren't sure that they needed those support ties.
Yeah.
So once I understood that, I was like, okay, but our anxiety is still high,
of course,
despite that. Yeah. But I understand, why they don't want to remove that.
Yeah, yeah. Where do we go from here? What is your group doing now for the next several months? What's your focus?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a short term and then even a long term. The short term is just, staying with these meetings, continue the community outreach. Continue showing that we have support for this, because I kind of felt like when I showed up with 300 up from 200 signatures, from rail meeting to rail meeting, committee meeting, people took notice. There were some actions taken to take hybrid off the table, I think, if you remember, right? And I was like surprised because I'd never heard that before until last Wednesday. Yeah, I was like, okay, people now realizing that NOPA is a force to be, reckoned with, if you will, and that we're not just kind of, we sort of thought we were cool, but we're not really that cool. But that's why I think, we got to keep the pressure on. So, my goal is 400 signatures by the time the next rail committee meeting, right? And maybe even 500, I don't know. Right? It's just keep showing this growing base of support for these things that we're talking about to show City Council that we're serious about it. And not just going to go away, and just kind of disappear. Yeah. So that's part of that, and to make sure that hopefully the preferences we have will make it through the cuts of the filters, right? And then the longer term things that we're looking at are, well, okay, let's say it is this very complex solution that we talk about. We close Churchill, we got to improve Embarcadero. Then it's working with the city to make sure those things that we said were going to happen are going to happen, because there's a lot of things we'd love to see happen, right? That range from things that are happening, we hear potentially even this year, the improvements to the Churchill-Alma intersection for bikes and pedestrians. There's something that's going to be happening hopefully by the end of the year that it might spill into next year. But that kind of dovetails into, well, we got to rebuild Embarcadero's underpass. Yeah. Right, let's widen that to 4, okay? We got to fix the lights at Town and Country because that's the backup, right? People get caught in there and you can't even get through there anymore, right? And then, oh, by the way, there's a light for Pali students to cross. Why don't we figure out a way of doing a pedestrian underpass for them so they don't, there are people, those kids are running across Embarcadero on their way to Town and Country to get something to eat. That's very bad, right?
That's dangerous.
Yeah, we should do something about that. And that removes the lights. Like, why should we have that light there? So, and then figuring out how to time the lights at El Camino to the Embarcadero and El Camino light. So that's timed with the other light at Town Country. Like right now, those two aren't really in sync. So
it's a really cascading
It's quite a agenda,
project.
David. It's quite a
It starts at Churchill and just keeps going.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so, well, we want to make sure that flow is effectively and efficiently, whatever flow moves over to Embarcadero, so that we don't have people coming to us saying like, oh man, you said you're going to close Churchill, but now the problem's worse, right? Or even to the city. So we want to make sure that these other things happen, because we see that things won't be negatively impacted. They will shift a little bit, but as a system, things will still remain.
You don't want to create problems just to protect that intersection. Yeah,
that's right.
Gennady, I'm hearing a lot of money figures being thrown around, like for studies and whatnot. What is the city facing kind of as next steps, and what costs are we looking at? Is there more studying to be done?
Well, there's always more studying to be done, because I think they ultimately hope to get to about 4 options. Each one's probably going to cost dozens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
To study?
That's where they're trying to get to a manageable amount. Right now they have 10, so that's the whole point of this exercise.
Okay.
And there's also other costs, like they just approved a $1.2 million contract with AACOM for outreach and for technical services. So and that's just the current cost. Once they pick a project, then you're going to start talking about real money.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have
The money to build them.
we have the Measure B that's got $700 million in it, but it has to be split among 3 cities, and Palo Alto
County
is
measure,
currently the caboose, as the city manager put it. So, yeah, we're talking hundreds of millions dollars down the road, and probably dozens of thousands by the end of the year, just to study these options.
Okay.
How about Caltrain? What would their input be in terms of financing? Did they put any money into this at all?
That's a good question. I'd have to research that further. I mean, I know Caltrain has input in terms of talking to the city and being part of this technical advisory group. But as far as actual paying for Palo Alto's grade separations, in the past the city has had no luck. They may change in the future, who knows? But and high-speed rail is another factor that might come in. There might be a funding source down the line, but again, I don't think it's anything that the city could bank on.
So the council is looking at this in May. It's
Yeah,
agendized.
I believe May 7th is the meeting when they're going to be making a decision.
Although I heard there might be a conflict on May 7th. May's fall to May 14th.
Yeah, sometime in the next month. Yeah, I'm not sure if they don't have a set agenda yet for that meeting, but yeah, the next few weeks they're going to narrow down to a list of 10-ish.
Okay, well, we'll be following the conversation. Dave Shen, thanks so much for being here and for explaining what NOPA's doing, and best of luck to you.
Thanks. Thanks very much for having me.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Behind the Headlines. If you liked what you saw, please hit like below or subscribe to us to get notifications. You can follow all of Palo Alto news on paloaltoonline.com. To talk about this issue, go to Town Square, the community discussion forum, at paloaltoonline.com/square. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so go find us there. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.